The hum of the server racks was a familiar symphony. The heartbeat of Innovate Co., a sound I had come to love more than almost anything. I stood at the massive panoramic window on the 40th floor, looking out over the sprawling city of Newport. The afternoon sun, bright and golden, glinted off the glass towers, reflecting a triumph that felt almost unreal. Below, the city bustled, unaware of the quiet revolution we had orchestrated from this very perch. This quarter had shattered every expectation. Record-breaking revenue, groundbreaking product launches, a surge in market share that had analysts scrambling to update their forecasts. My name, Alex, was synonymous with Innovate Co., a company I had built from a whispered idea in a cramped garage into a global tech empire. A warm, deep pride swelled in my chest. I remembered the early days, the endless nights fueled by cheap coffee and sheer stubbornness, the doubt in every investor's eyes. Now, Innovate Co. was a titan. We didn't just innovate. We defined the future. My team, my family had made this possible. I glanced around the polished conference room, where celebratory murmurs filled the air. My executive team, their faces glowing with a mix of exhaustion and elation, clinked glasses of sparkling cider. They had earned this, every single one of them. My eyes swept across the room, taking in the smiles, the pats on the back, the shared sense of accomplishment. Then, my gaze snagged on a figure tucked away in a corner, far from the central cluster of celebration. Sarah Jennings, one of our newest board members, a sleek, impeccably dressed woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes. She held a glass, but she wasn't clinking it. Instead, her cool blue eyes, usually so calculating, were fixed on me with an intensity that felt off. It wasn't admiration, nor was it the shared joy that permeated the room. It was something colder, almost analytical. A flicker of an expression I couldn't quite place, like she was studying a complex problem. Or perhaps a flaw in a meticulously crafted design. A tiny tremor, almost imperceptible, snaked through my triumphant mood. It was fleeting, a mere whisper of unease against the loud roar of success. Sarah wasn't alone. Richard Thorne, a longtime associate and another key board member, stood beside her, leaning in conspiratorially. Richard, with his perpetually smooth suit and an unnervingly calm demeanor, often wore an expression of mild amusement. But today, his lips were curved in a faint, knowing smirk, a look that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a private joke, shared between them, one I was clearly not privy to. I dismissed it, pushing the thought away like an annoying fly. This was a moment for celebration, not for scrutinizing the subtle glances of board members. My focus had always been forward, on the next innovation, the next challenge. Maybe it was just the exhaustion playing tricks on me, or perhaps the weight of responsibility that never truly lifted. Yet the image of Sarah's cold gaze and Richard's knowing smirk lingered, a small dark stain on an otherwise perfect canvas. The confidence I felt, the deep satisfaction of seeing my vision realized, was absolute. But underneath it all, a faint, unsettling note had been struck, a discord in the harmony of my success. I shook my head, took a deep breath, and turned back to the window, the city lights beginning to twinkle below. The future was ours. Or so I believed. The future as I saw it was an open field, ripe for planting. Innovate Co. wasn't just a company, it was a testament to what passion and perseverance could achieve. My journey had started with a single burning idea: to make technology intuitive, accessible, and truly transformative for everyday lives. I wasn't interested in building gadgets for the sake of novelty. I wanted to build tools that solved real problems, that connected people, that opened new avenues for creativity and learning. I'd launched Innovate Co. 10 years ago, right after dropping out of a prestigious computer science program at Stanford. Everyone called it reckless. I called it necessary. The idea for our first product, the Nexus Hub, a device that seamlessly integrated all smart home technologies long before others even dreamed of it, came to me in a late-night coding session. I lived off ramen and adrenaline, renting a small dusty garage in Silicon Valley. My first team was 3 other crazy idealists, equally committed to burning the midnight oil. We poured our souls into that first prototype, refining it, testing it, and then refining it again. My vision was simple: elegant design, powerful functionality, and a user experience so smooth it felt like magic. I was a hands-on leader. I'd spend hours alongside my engineers, debugging code, sketching designs, even assembling early units myself. I knew every line of code, every component, every pixel of our user interface. My office was rarely empty, even in the dead of night. I believed in leading by example, sharing both the triumphs and the burdens. This wasn't just a job. It was my life's work, my purpose. I sacrificed relationships, social life, even sleep, because I believed in Innovate Co. with every fiber of my being. My parents, practical folks from a small town in Ohio, often worried about my intense focus. "Alex, don't forget to live," my mom would say, her voice warm over the phone. But for me, this was living. Innovate Co. grew, not in a linear fashion, but in explosive bursts. The Nexus Hub became a sensation, We followed it with the Connect OS, an operating system so user-friendly it made competitors look clunky and outdated. Our products weren't just bought, they were loved. We became known for our ethical sourcing, our commitment to customer privacy, and our genuine efforts to use tech for good. That was my promise, my philosophy. Technology with a conscience. Richard Thorne joined Innovate Co. in its 5th year, brought on as Chief Operating Officer. He came from a background in traditional manufacturing, a stark contrast to our agile tech culture. I saw it as an opportunity to bring in diverse perspectives, to ground our innovation with solid operational rigor. Richard was charming, with a quick wit and an uncanny ability to navigate complex corporate structures. He always wore perfectly tailored suits, even on casual Fridays, and his smile was a practiced, confident thing. He quickly became a key figure, handling logistics, supply chains, and investor relations, freeing me to focus on product development and vision. At first, we worked well together. Richard admired my drive, or so he said, and I valued his pragmatism. He'd often start sentences with, "Alex, your vision is unparalleled, but we need to consider." It was a dance we performed, my idealism balanced by his realism. But over time, the buts became more frequent, more insistent. He started pushing for cost-cutting measures that felt antithetical to our quality standards, for quicker product cycles that risked sacrificing our meticulous development process. "The market moves fast, Alex," he'd say, tapping a pen against a financial report. "We can't afford to be sentimental about a single screw." I'd push back, explaining that our reputation was built on uncompromising quality, not rushed releases. These discussions grew tenser, though always civil on the surface. Richard never raised his voice, but his eyes would harden, a subtle shift that spoke volumes. I often wondered if he saw my passion as a weakness, a barrier to pure, unadulterated profit. Sarah Jennings arrived much later, about a year before the record-breaking quarter. She was a venture capitalist representing a powerful investment firm that had acquired a significant stake in Innovate Co. Sarah was brilliant, no doubt. She spoke in perfectly phrased sentences, her arguments always backed by reams of data and projections. She was sharp, incisive, and utterly focused on returns. She saw Innovate Co. as a machine for generating wealth, and my technology with a conscience philosophy as an inefficiency. "Alex, your social impact initiatives are laudable," she'd remark during board meetings, her voice smooth as silk. "But are they truly maximizing shareholder value? Our competitors aren't building schools in developing nations. They're acquiring smaller companies to eliminate competition." She'd present graphs showing how a slight shift in our R&D budget towards more immediately profitable ventures, or a less ethical but cheaper supply chain, could boost our quarterly earnings by a significant percentage. I'd argue passionately that our long-term value lay in our brand loyalty, our integrity, our ability to attract top talent who believed in our mission. "We're not just selling products, Sarah," I'd explain, trying to make her see beyond the numbers. "We're selling a promise, a better way of living." She'd nod, a polite, vacant smile on her face, but her eyes would betray a clear impatience, as if I were speaking in a language she simply didn't understand. The friction became undeniable. Board meetings, once lively discussions about innovation and impact, turned into battlegrounds. Richard, sensing an ally, often echoed Sarah's sentiments, framing my long-term vision as risk-averse or too idealistic in a rapidly evolving market. "We need to be agile, Alex," he'd say, looking from Sarah to the other board members, cultivating a narrative that I was somehow holding the company back. "We need to be aggressive. The market won't wait for us to perfect every detail." My passion, which had once been my greatest strength, now felt like a target. I saw their glances during presentations, the subtle eye rolls, the way they'd exchange whispers when I spoke about our next big transformative idea. They saw me as an obstacle to their version of success, a version that prioritized profit over purpose, speed over quality. The whispers turned into thinly veiled criticisms in private conversations, then outright challenges in public. They started questioning my decisions, my leadership style, even my sanity for sticking to a vision they deemed outdated. The tension was a constant, low hum beneath the surface of Innovate Co.'s gleaming facade. I tried to bridge the gap, to explain, to compromise where I could without sacrificing our core values. I presented data showing the long-term benefits of our ethical approach, the brand loyalty we commanded, the talent we attracted. But their minds were made up. They saw a different path, one paved with quick cash and ruthless market dominance. They admired the empire I built, but they wanted to strip it down, rebuild it in their image, and claim the spoils. The triumph of our record-breaking quarter, which should have solidified my position, only seemed to sharpen their appetite. They saw a golden goose, and they wanted to start carving it up. The whisper of unease from the celebratory meeting solidified into a nagging certainty. Something was brewing, and it wasn't good. My company, my legacy, felt like it was slipping through my fingers, inch by agonizing inch, even as we soared higher than ever before. The email arrived like any other, a standard calendar invite for a special board meeting. The subject line was innocuous, the sender Richard Thorne. No agenda attached, which was unusual, but not unheard of for urgent matters. My gut tightened a little, remembering the looks Richard and Sarah had exchanged. I pushed it down. It was probably about the new regulatory challenges in the European market, or perhaps a sudden opportunity for expansion in Asia. Business as usual, albeit with a heightened sense of urgency. I walked into the executive boardroom on a Tuesday morning, feeling a knot of nervous energy in my stomach. The room felt different today, colder. The usual buzz of pre-meeting chatter was absent. Instead, an uncomfortable silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the soft clink of a coffee cup as one of the junior board members shifted nervously. Every seat was taken. Richard sat at the head of the table, not in his usual spot, but in mine, the CEO's chair. Sarah was to his right, her expression as unreadable as ever. Across from them, the other board members sat stiffly, their faces a mixture of apprehension and avoidance. No one met my eye as I walked in. My assistant, Maria, usually so cheerful, stood by the door looking pale, her eyes wide with something akin to fear. "Alex," Richard began, his voice smooth, devoid of any warmth. He gestured to the empty seat to Sarah's left, away from the power positions. "Glad you could make it." I took the seat, my heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Richard, what's going on?" There was no agenda. Richard leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished mahogany table. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. "Well, Alex, this meeting is the agenda. Or rather, you are." A cold dread seeped into my bones. Sarah picked up a pristine white folder from the table. "Alex," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, "the board has convened today to discuss the future leadership of Innovate Co." My breath hitched. "What are you talking about? Our quarterly results just set new records. Our market cap is at an all-time high." I looked around the table, searching for an ally, a friendly face, but found none. Most stared at the table, at their hands, anywhere but at me. Richard chuckled softly. "Performance isn't just about numbers, Alex. It's about vision. It's about adaptability. It's about maximizing shareholder value." Sarah opened the folder. "We've compiled a detailed report, Alex. Concerns have been raised regarding your, shall we say, outdated approach to market strategy. Your resistance to aggressive acquisition tactics. Your continued focus on costly ethical sourcing initiatives. Your reluctance to streamline R&D for more immediate returns." She recited a litany of my core values, turning them into accusations. These decisions, while perhaps well-intentioned, are perceived as hindering Innovate Co.'s long-term growth potential and financial agility. This is absurd. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent room. These are the principles Innovate Co. is built on. This is my vision, my values. We became an industry leader precisely because we challenged the status quo, because we put quality and ethics first. My voice, usually calm and measured, cracked with disbelief and anger. "You want to strip away everything that makes Innovate Co. unique? Everything that makes us us?" Richard raised a placid hand. Now, Alex, no need for dramatics. This is a business decision. The board feels that Innovate Co. requires a new direction, a fresh perspective, one that is more aligned with the current market demands." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, then delivered the final blow. "Therefore, the board has cast a preliminary vote of no confidence in your leadership as CEO." My world tilted. No confidence? A preliminary vote? This wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. They hadn't consulted me, hadn't warned me. This was a coup, meticulously planned and executed in the shadows. The quietness of the room, the avoidance of their eyes, it all clicked into place. They had all been bought, convinced, or coerced. A preliminary vote? I spat the words out. "When? How?" "I'm the CEO. I should have been informed, allowed to present my case." "The discussions have been ongoing for some time, Alex," Sarah interjected, her voice still smooth, clinical. "The board believes that a rapid change is necessary to protect shareholder interests." She pushed the folder across the table towards me. Inside, I saw carefully compiled reports, spreadsheets, and legal documents. Fabricated performance issues, misleading projections, cherry-picked data twisted to paint a picture of a failing leader, despite the company's unprecedented success. My ethical sourcing policies were labeled as wasteful expenditures. My long-term R&D projects were unjustified capital sinks. My eyes scanned the documents, each word a dagger. They had taken my life's work, my passion, and systematically dismantled it, turning every strength into a weakness. They had planned this for months, perhaps even years. Richard, my trusted COO. Sarah, the investor I had welcomed into our fold. "This is a betrayal," I whispered, the words raw, tearing at my throat. My vision blurred. "After everything I poured into this company, you're just going to throw me out?" Richard leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. It's not personal, Alex, it's business. And the vote is conclusive. Effective immediately, your tenure as CEO of Innovate Co. is terminated. The air left my lungs in a rush. Terminated. Just like that. The word hung in the room, heavy and final. My company, my creation, stripped away. A wave of profound humiliation washed over me, burning hot and then leaving me feeling icy cold. They weren't just taking my job. They were taking my identity, my purpose. They were taking my legacy. And who, I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper, will be taking over? Richard's smile widened, a predatory flash of teeth. The board has appointed an interim CEO, with plans for a permanent successor to be announced shortly. I will be stepping into that interim role. He raised a hand towards Sarah. And Sarah will be leading a new strategic oversight committee, ensuring we pivot swiftly to a more aggressive, market-driven approach. The room spun. Richard, the COO I had brought in, taught, and trusted. Now sitting in my chair, poised to dismantle everything I stood for. Sarah, the shark in a tailored suit, now given the reins to guide the destruction. I pushed myself up from the table, my legs shaky. My voice, when it came, was laced with bitter venom. You two, you've been planning this all along, haven't you? While I was building, you were plotting. Richard merely shrugged, a picture of calm indifference. One could say we were simply ensuring the company's evolution, Alex. A necessary recalibration. I looked at the faces around the table again. Still no eye contact. Just silence. Their complicity was as damning as Richard and Sarah's treachery. My mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of what was happening. This wasn't just a corporate maneuver. It was a personal assassination. They hadn't just ousted me. They had publicly humiliated me, questioning my competence, my vision, my very fitness to lead the company I had literally created out of nothing. Get out, Richard said, his tone shifting, now impatient. Your security access will be revoked within the hour. Your personal belongings will be packed and sent to your residence. A severance package will be delivered via your legal counsel. He gestured vaguely towards the door. Maria will escort you out. Maria, eyes brimming with unshed tears, stepped forward. I didn't acknowledge her. I felt numb, disconnected from my own body. The vibrant, bustling world of Innovate Co., which had been my home for a decade, now felt alien, hostile. I looked one last time at the panoramic window, at the city I had once felt I reigned over. Now it just looked vast and indifferent. As I walked out, the polished floors felt like quicksand. Each step was heavy, laden with the weight of shattered dreams and searing betrayal. The silence of the boardroom followed me, but in my head, the echo of Richard's words, terminated, screamed. I was adrift, cut loose from the anchor of my life, my legacy stolen, my heart crushed beneath the heel of corporate ambition. The days that followed blurred into a suffocating haze of disbelief and despair. The humiliation was a physical ache, a constant pressure behind my eyes, a tightness in my chest. One moment, I was at the pinnacle, revered as a visionary. The next, I was a corporate pariah, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms across the country. The news hit the wires almost immediately. Innovate Co. ousts founder Alex. Board cites strategic differences, need for new leadership. The articles were cold, clinical, yet beneath the polite corporate speak, I could feel the venom. Analysts weighed in, speculating on my supposed stubbornness and inability to adapt. Social media, a beast I had once understood and leveraged, now turned on me. Alex lost touch. Too idealistic for the real world. Another founder who couldn't let go. Every comment was a fresh stab, peeling back layers of my already raw skin. I felt exposed, vulnerable, naked to the world's judgment. My apartment, a sleek penthouse I'd bought with Innovate Co.'s early success, once a sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. Every piece of furniture, every gadget, every framed photo of my old team felt like a mocking reminder of what I had lost. I stopped answering calls, ignored emails, and eventually just turned off my phone. The silence was deafening, only broken by the frantic, panicked thoughts swirling in my head. How could this happen? How could they do this? The financial strain hit quickly. My Innovate Co. stock, once a massive nest egg, was now tied up in legal disputes over the terms of my ousting. My severance package, while substantial, was frozen pending review, a cynical move by Richard and Sarah to keep me on the ropes. The penthouse mortgage was due, the monthly bills piled up. I had lived a life of relative luxury, pouring most of my earnings back into R&D or employee benefits, assuming Innovate Co. would always be there. Now the well had run dry. I had to sell my prized vintage car, a sleek electric roadster I'd helped design the interface for. It felt like selling a piece of my soul. I watched it drive away, a lump in my throat, the only sound the crunch of gravel under its tires. My professional identity, once so solid, had dissolved. For 10 years, Alex meant Innovate Co. Now it meant nothing. Who was I without the company? Without the daily challenges, the creative problem-solving, the driving purpose, I was just Alex, a name without a title, a past without a future. I spent days staring at the ceiling, sometimes not even bothering to get out of bed. The vibrant, confident CEO was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. My reflection in the mirror showed sunken eyes, unkempt hair, a haunted expression. Anger simmered beneath the surface, a constant low-grade fever. Anger at Richard's calculated smirk, at Sarah's cold, analytical cruelty, at the cowardly board members who had stood by. But beneath the anger, a more insidious enemy lurked, self-doubt. Had I been too naive? Too trusting? Had my vision been fundamentally flawed, as they had claimed? Maybe I was obsolete. The thought was a poison, seeping into every corner of my mind, eroding my confidence, making me question every decision I had ever made. Sleep became a distant memory. When it did come, it was fitful, plagued by nightmares of boardroom showdowns, of Richard's laugh echoing through empty halls. Food lost its taste. I'd pick at meals, the flavors bland, textures unappealing. My once sharp mind felt dull, clouded by a thick fog of misery. The world outside felt distant, unreal. I felt disconnected, like watching my life unfold from behind a thick pane of glass. A few loyal friends, remnants of the early Innovate Co. days, tried to reach out. Marcus, my former lead engineer, who'd been with me since the garage. He showed up at my door one afternoon, a six-pack of craft beer in hand, his face etched with concern. "Alex," he started, his voice gentle. "You gotta talk to someone. This isn't like you." I just shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. "They took everything, Marcus. Everything." He put a hand on my shoulder. "They took the company, Alex, not your brain. Not your ideas. Not your spirit." But even as he said it, I felt none of those things. My spirit felt crushed, my ideas barren, my brain a jumbled mess of accusations and regret. I watched Innovate Co. from afar, through the news. Richard, now the interim CEO, was everywhere. He revamped the company image, emphasizing lean operations and aggressive market penetration. Sarah, always by his side, spoke of unshackling Innovate Co. from its unnecessary baggage. They unveiled a new product line, rushed and derivative, clearly a move to quickly capitalize on existing market trends rather than create new ones. They announced layoffs, citing restructuring for efficiency. Each headline was a fresh wound, confirming my fears. They were dismantling my legacy, brick by painful brick. They were turning Innovate Co. into everything I had fought against. The company I loved was being defiled. I fell deeper into the abyss. I stopped answering Marcus's calls. My apartment grew messy, dusty. Dishes piled up in the sink. The vibrant Alex, the visionary CEO, was gone, replaced by a ghost haunting her own life. I'd sit for hours, just staring blankly, the silence of the empty rooms pressing down on me. There were moments when I felt utterly adrift, like a ship without a rudder, lost at sea. The future was a terrifying blank canvas, and I had no paint, no brush, no desire to even pick one up. This was rock bottom. This was the dark, suffocating weight of profound hopelessness. The anger was still there, but it was buried deep under layers of pain and apathy. I just wanted it all to end. The suffocating memories, the crushing shame, the aching void where my purpose used to be. The change didn't come like a sudden burst of light. It was a slow, agonizing crawl out of the darkness, sparked by a single, searing image. It happened one miserable afternoon, 6 months after my ousting. I was slumped on my couch, unshaven and hollow-eyed, mindlessly flipping through channels. A news report flickered onto the screen, a segment on Innovate Co. Richard, now officially CEO, stood beaming beside Sarah, who was announced as the new head of strategic development. They were unveiling their latest product, a new iteration of the Nexus Hub, stripped of many of its core privacy features and designed with cheaper components. The reporter lauded their streamlined approach and aggressive market strategy. But it wasn't just the product that ignited something within me. It was Richard's words, his smug, self-satisfied tone. Innovate Co., he declared, is finally fulfilling its true potential, unburdened by past limitations. He was talking about me. He was erasing me, rewriting history. And then he smiled directly into the camera, a triumphant, almost gloating smile that twisted my stomach. It was the same smirk he'd worn in the boardroom that day. Something snapped. Not with a bang, but a quiet, searing burn. The despair, the self-doubt, the apathy. They didn't vanish, but they were suddenly overshadowed by a cold, unwavering fury. Unburdened by past limitations. He believed he was better, that he had improved my company by tearing down everything I stood for. He had stolen my legacy and was now defiling it. A singular, potent thought solidified in my mind. I will make him pay. It wasn't just about reclaiming my company or my reputation. It was about justice. It was about proving them wrong, not just to the world, but to myself. My despair began to transmute slowly, painfully, into a steely resolve. The anger, once a debilitating weight, now felt like fuel. I stood up, my muscles stiff, my joints protesting. I hadn't cleaned in weeks, but something shifted inside. The first thing I did was pick up my phone, which I hadn't touched in what felt like forever. I saw Marcus's missed calls, countless messages from friends. I hesitated, then called him. His voice when he answered was laced with concern. "Alex, you okay?" "No," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "But I'm going to be. And I need your help." Marcus didn't ask questions. He was at my apartment within an hour, bringing coffee and a small bag of groceries. I told him everything, the plan forming in my mind, the burning need to not just survive, but to utterly dismantle those who had betrayed me. His eyes widened, but then a slow smile spread across his face. "I always knew you had more fight in you, Alex," he said, a renewed spark in his own gaze. "What's the plan?" My plan was audacious, bordering on insane. I would build a new company. Not to compete, but to disrupt. To overshadow. To leave Innovate Co., under Richard and Sarah's stewardship, in the dust. I would call it Phoenix Labs. Like the mythical bird, we would rise from the ashes. We started small, in Marcus's cluttered garage, a poetic echo of Innovate Co.'s beginnings. He was a brilliant engineer, still fiercely loyal and eager for a new challenge. We roped in Maya, our former lead UI/UX designer, who had also left Innovate Co. shortly after my departure, disgusted by the new direction. Maya was a creative genius able to translate complex technology into beautiful, intuitive experiences. She still believed in the technology with a conscience philosophy. Her anger at Richard and Sarah's cynical approach fueled her as much as mine. Our core idea was bold: to develop an entirely new operating system and hardware ecosystem, one that was not only incredibly powerful and user-friendly, but also built from the ground up with absolute user privacy and open-source transparency as its cornerstones. It was everything Innovate Co. should have been, everything Richard and Sarah were stripping away. This wasn't just about a product. It was about a philosophy, a movement. The early days were reminiscent of Innovate Co.'s birth, but with a sharper edge of determination. Long nights, cheap food, endless brainstorming sessions. But this time, the stakes felt higher, the motivation deeper. We weren't just building a company. We were building a weapon. I used what little capital I had, a small portion of my frozen severance that my lawyers finally managed to release. We worked in secret, under pseudonyms, avoiding any hint that I, Alex, was involved. We couldn't afford Innovate Co.'s lawyers trying to block us before we even started. Our network of loyalists grew, quietly, cautiously. Former Innovate Co. engineers and designers, disillusioned by Richard and Sarah's corporate greed, reached out, eager to be part of something meaningful again. They risked their careers, their reputations to join Phoenix Labs. Their belief in me, even after my public downfall, was a powerful reaffirmation. My daily routine shifted dramatically. No more staring at ceilings. Instead, I devoured industry reports, reverse-engineered Innovate Co.'s new product lines, and meticulously tracked Richard and Sarah's public statements. I saw their weaknesses, their impatience for quick profits, their reliance on existing trends, their increasing disregard for ethical practices. They were making Innovate Co. vulnerable, eroding the very foundation I had built. I kept a detailed dossier on every misstep, every slip, every compromise. This wasn't just about innovation. It was about strategy, about exploiting every crack in their armor. The quiet vengeance began to consume me, but not in a destructive way. It was a focused energy, a cold fire in my belly. I shed the weight of self-pity, replacing it with rigorous discipline. I started exercising again, eating well, sharpening my mind with complex problem-solving. Every line of code written, every design perfected, every strategic move mapped out, felt like a step towards reclaiming what was mine. Phoenix Labs became my new obsession, my second chance. We developed a prototype, a sleek, minimalist device powered by our revolutionary new OS. It was faster, more secure, and infinitely more elegant than anything Innovate Co. was putting out. The team was small, agile, and fiercely dedicated. We were bound by a shared sense of purpose and a quiet, burning desire for vindication. The emotional tone in our small, makeshift lab was electric. There was a palpable sense of excitement, of impending glory. The despair was gone, replaced by a quiet, simmering confidence. We were a phoenix indeed, rising from the ashes, ready to soar. And when we did, we would cast a shadow so vast and encompassing that it would utterly extinguish the empire that had sought to destroy me. The hope wasn't just for success. It was hope for vengeance, for the sweet, definitive taste of absolute triumph over those who had tried to bury me. The stage was being set. The game was on. The day Phoenix Labs launched its flagship product, the Ether system, felt like the culmination of a lifetime. The air in our small, rented presentation hall in downtown Silver Creek was thick with anticipation. Not the opulent, extravagant launch events Innovate Co. was famous for, but a humble, intimate gathering of industry insiders, tech journalists, and a handful of our most passionate early adopters. We didn't have a multi-million-dollar marketing budget. We had a revolutionary product and a story of quiet resilience. I stood on the simple stage, a stark contrast to the grand InnovateCo podiums I used to command. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. My name, Alex, was still kept out of the public narrative. I was introduced only as the visionary lead architect of Phoenix Labs, but everyone in the room knew. The whispers were already starting. The Ether system, I announced. My voice steady, projecting confidence I barely felt. It is not just a device. It's a promise. A promise of true user control, unparalleled privacy, and seamless innovation. I held up the sleek, obsidian-colored device, its interface glowing with an ethereal light. Maya, standing just off stage, gave me a small, encouraging nod. Marcus beamed from the front row. The demonstration was flawless. The Ether system's intuitive gestures, its robust privacy protocols, its lightning-fast performance, each feature drew gasps from the audience. We showed how it could outperform InnovateCo's new Nexus hub in every benchmark, how its secure encryption was unbreakable, how its open-source nature fostered a community of developers that InnovateCo had abandoned. The message was clear. Phoenix Labs was not just better. It was the future. It was everything InnovateCo used to be, and more. The market reaction was immediate and seismic. Tech blogs exploded. Social media buzzed. Reviewers, initially skeptical, were quickly converted. Ether System, the true successor to InnovateCo's golden age, one headline screamed. Another declared, Phoenix Labs rises. Ether System redefines innovation. Within weeks, our pre-order numbers skyrocketed, overwhelming our small manufacturing capabilities. A good problem to have. The brutal market battle began. Richard and Sarah were blindsided. They had dismissed Phoenix Labs as a small, niche competitor, an annoyance at best. They responded with a frantic, uncoordinated marketing blitz, trying to discredit Ether, calling it unproven and overhyped. But their words fell flat. Our product spoke for itself. I, still operating largely in the shadows, watched their every move. Their mismanagement was glaring. Under Richard, InnovateCo had become sluggish, bureaucratic, and reactive. They had cut corners on R&D, leading to stagnant innovation. They had alienated their most talented engineers, many of whom had either joined Phoenix Labs or left the industry entirely. Their ethical compromises, which Sarah had championed for short-term gains, were now coming back to haunt them. Our strategy was surgical. We didn't just compete. We exposed. Each week, Phoenix Labs would release new data, new reports, subtly revealing InnovateCo's ethical lapses. We highlighted their cheaper, often unethically sourced components, their lax privacy policies, the bloatware pre-installed on their devices. We pointed out how their new features were often just watered-down versions of concepts I had rejected years ago for being incomplete or compromising user trust. A pivotal moment came when an anonymous whistleblower, a former InnovateCo engineer, disgusted by the company's new direction, leaked internal documents to a major tech publication. These documents, which Marcus and I had helped authenticate, detailed how Richard and Sarah had deliberately suppressed advanced R&D projects because they didn't promise immediate profit. They showed how corners were cut in manufacturing, leading to a spike in product defects that were being quietly covered up. And most damningly, they revealed a policy shift that allowed InnovateCo to sell anonymized user data to third-party advertisers, a direct violation of the privacy principles I had embedded in the company's original charter. The revelation was devastating. Public outrage erupted. InnovateCo's stock plummeted, dropping by 15% in a single day. Major retailers began pulling their products from shelves, fearing a backlash. Richard and Sarah appeared on news channels, desperately trying to do damage control, their polished smiles now strained, their voices defensive. They blamed disgruntled former employees and misinformation campaigns, but the public wasn't buying it. The contrast between InnovateCo's greedy, ethically compromised stance and Phoenix Labs' transparent, user-centric approach was stark. The market battle turned into a rout. InnovateCo was bleeding customers, losing market share at an alarming rate. Their reputation, once pristine under my leadership, was now irrevocably tarnished. Their once loyal customer base felt betrayed. My former company was spiraling, caught in a death spiral of its own making, orchestrated by the very individuals who had seized it from me. I watched from my new, modest office at Phoenix Labs, the quiet satisfaction spreading through me. There was no joy, not exactly. More like a cold, precise execution of a complex plan. I saw Richard's desperate press conferences, Sarah's increasingly frantic attempts to salvage investor confidence. Their faces were no longer smug. They were etched with panic. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated the power of true innovation, true integrity. The climax wasn't just about Phoenix Labs' success. It was about InnovateCo's imminent failure. The tension was palpable, a high-stakes chess game where every move brought me closer to checkmate. The thrilling anticipation of the final blow, of watching their empire crumble, was a powerful, almost intoxicating sensation. Innovate Co., the company I poured my life into, was now threatened with extinction, not by my hand directly, but by the rot that Richard and Sarah had allowed to fester within it. And I, the architect of their downfall, was ready to deliver the final devastating blow. The end, when it came, was swift and absolute. Innovate Co., hemorrhaging customers and cash, its stock value in freefall, was in desperate straits. The scandals surrounding their ethical compromises and shoddy manufacturing had eroded public trust to an irreparable degree. No amount of damage control could mend the shattered image of a company that had once stood for quality and integrity. The board, now a frantic group of frightened investors, finally turned on Richard and Sarah. They were publicly disgraced, removed from their positions, and faced a barrage of lawsuits from disgruntled shareholders and consumers. Richard, whose smooth charm had once been his greatest asset, was now viewed as a reckless corporate villain. Sarah, the cold, calculating investor, was branded as ruthless and morally bankrupt. Their careers, once soaring, were in ruins. I saw a picture of Richard leaving Innovate Co. headquarters, his face pale and drawn, surrounded by a scrum of reporters. He looked utterly defeated, a shadow of the man who had sat in my chair that fateful day. Sarah, too, vanished from the public eye, her investment firm facing significant losses and a crisis of confidence. Phoenix Labs, meanwhile, soared. Our Ether system became the industry standard, lauded for its performance, privacy, and user experience. We secured massive investment rounds, not from venture capitalists looking for quick flips, but from ethical investment groups and foundations who believed in our mission. Our market capitalization quickly surpassed Innovate Co.'s peak value. We hired thousands of talented individuals, many of them former Innovate Co. employees who had found their passion reignited with our vision. The ultimate victory wasn't a hostile takeover, though we could have easily initiated one. Instead, it was far more poetic. Innovate Co., a shell of its former self, its products obsolete, its reputation ruined, was eventually acquired by a smaller, lesser-known tech firm for a fraction of its former value. It wasn't even a competitor. It was a company that wanted to salvage some of Innovate Co.'s intellectual property patents and perhaps a few remnants of its once great legacy. The Innovate Co. brand, once a beacon of innovation, was quietly phased out. It didn't die with a bang, but with a whimper, erased from the industry by its own destructive leadership. I stood on the stage at our new Phoenix Labs headquarters, a gleaming campus we had built in Silver Creek. The roar of the crowd, the applause, the flash of cameras, it was familiar, yet profoundly different. I was no longer hiding behind a title. I was Alex, the CEO of Phoenix Labs, the visionary, the one who had risen from the ashes. Marcus and Maya stood beside me, their faces alight with pride and accomplishment. "We didn't just build a company," I said, my voice strong and clear. "We rebuilt trust. We redefined what technology can be when guided by purpose, not just profit." Later that evening, alone in my new spacious office, I looked out at the city lights. The victory was resounding, deeply satisfying. I had reclaimed my professional legacy, not just by surviving, but by building something even greater. I had watched the architects of my betrayal face public and professional ruin, their names now synonymous with corporate failure. The vindication was sweet, a cool balm on old wounds. But as I gazed out, I felt a quiet contemplation. The journey had changed me. The trusting, perhaps slightly naive Alex of Innovate Co.'s early days was gone. In her place was a stronger, harder, more cautious leader. The fire of vengeance had forged a new kind of resilience, but it had also left scars, invisible but deep. I understood the ruthless side of corporate power now, the dark undercurrents of ambition and greed. I would never be so trusting again. The world had shown me its teeth, and I had learned to bite back. The profound satisfaction was tempered by a subtle bittersweetness. Innovate Co., my first love, was gone. Even though it was Richard and Sarah who had truly destroyed it, a part of me mourned its original vision, its lost potential. Yet looking at Phoenix Labs' vibrant new campus, buzzing with innovation and integrity, I knew I had built something better, something purer. I had won. Justice had been served in the most complete way possible. And in that victory, I found a powerful, hard-won sense of closure. The past was laid to rest, but the future, boundless and bright, was finally truly mine to define.